Animals of the night have some very scary stories to tell. From bats.
We're talking about 90% population decline within a single cave.
To flying squirrels.
The future for these squirrels is uncertain at this point.
Can they be saved? Or are there dark days ahead? It's just after sunset in Bruce Peninsula on Lake Huron. Rush hour for bats. Kristen Jonassen is setting up a big roadblock. She wants to see exactly who is flying by tonight.
We are setting up a pulley system for a large mist net. And so this will let us capture bats that are flying really high. This is 3 nets that we've hooked together to create one massive net. So to capture bats, I essentially go fishing in the sky. So we have this really fine mesh called a monofilament, and the bats will fly into it and then fall into a pocket of net, and then we can extract them after.
Kristen and Yordi are setting up 9 of these mist nets here in Bruce Peninsula National Park.
Tell me when it's tight enough.
All right, Yordi, are we twisted?
I'll run the top line out. Yeah, we're good.
This area is unique because it juts out into Lake Huron, providing a perfect flyover point for bats.
We know so little about bat migration, and if we don't understand what a species is doing, it's just very basic biology of where it is, what its patterns are, what habitats it needs. We can't even begin to start looking at how to conserve it.
And bats are in desperate need of conservation.
Right now, bat populations are plummeting fast because of white nose syndrome.
So white nose syndrome is an invasive fungus. This fungus is incredibly cold tolerant, and it grows on the muzzles of the bats and on their wing membranes. It attacks them while they're hibernating and while they aren't really able to mount an immune response and fight this.
Bats hibernate in cold, damp caves. It's a perfect environment for a fungus like white nose to spread quickly among a huddled group of sleeping bats. The fungus infects the bat's face, wings, and ears, breaking down skin and connective tissues. Bats go into hibernation with a certain amount of energy stored up so that they can last the winter. White nose robs them of that energy. In turn, they come out of hibernation early in the middle of winter in search of food. When there is none, they quickly starve to death.
Yeah, the population declines are really staggering. We're talking about 90% population declines within a single cave.
White nose syndrome has spread all around the Great Lakes, down to the southern United States. Of the 8 species found around the Great Lakes, 5 of them hibernate during the winter, and all 5 have been showing decreased population numbers. If white nose isn't stopped, all of them could go extinct in a matter of a few years. If that happens, insects could take over.
So just because we don't understand what an animal is doing, or we don't see its what benefits it provides doesn't mean that it's not doing a really important service. So all of Ontario's bats live on insects. They're primarily insectivorous or entirely insectivorous. So they can eat half of their body weight in a single night, and you have a colony of bats that can eat a large biomass of insects. We care about that both in terms of keeping pest species down, in terms of insects that bother us, and insects that affect crops. So we're talking about caterpillars that may damage crops.
Kristen wants to see a lot of bats tonight, but she's not hopeful.
I'm seeing fewer bats than I'd seen when I'd worked here previous years, so I have noticed that there's a decline in captures. All right, Yordi, can you just duck under the net there?
Yep.
Over near Peterborough on Lake Ontario, another nocturnal team is heading out into the forest, searching for a creature gliding overhead.
Okay, so we'll set a trap here. We bait the trap with sunflower hearts. Flying squirrels are part of the squirrel family. They have evolved adaptations for gliding. They have a flap of a skin that goes between their forelimbs and their hind limbs that allows them to glide through the forest. They can't fly, actually. They're sort of misnamed that way. They only can glide, and so they always lose elevation. But they're quite agile flyers in a sense. They're able to steer, and they can go quite a long distance. They can go about 3 times as far as they are high. They're nocturnal generally. They tend to be arboreal. They live in the forests.
There are 2 different types of flying squirrels: northern and southern. This forest is one of the few places that's home to both species.
The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Forest has a mixture of pine and oak and some coniferous species and some temperate hardwood species. This is a place that has both species, and there aren't very many places that you could go where you could observe both species at one time.
But the southern flying squirrel wasn't always here. It used to be considered a species of special concern, found much more south along Lake Erie. But as winters warmed up, their population started to expand farther north, all the way up past Lake Ontario. And in a rare move, they were deemed no longer a concern.
In recent years, we've seen that the southern flying squirrel has expanded its range by as much as 200 kilometers over about 9 years. We estimate that they've expanded their range by about a rate of 22 kilometers a year. And this is because they don't really do very well in cold winters. And as the winters are getting warmer, the squirrels are able to survive farther north.
Now Jeff Bowman and his team are here trying to catch the squirrels to see just how the 2 species are getting along.
What we've observed is it's a very dynamic range boundary right now.
Dynamic means it's very unpredictable. And Jeff needs to know what the southern flying squirrels are doing to their northern cousins.
We don't know if it's a good news story or a bad news story.
With the moon rising in Bruce Peninsula, bats are finding their way into Kristen's nets, and they're not happy about it.
Kristen and Yordi are trying to catch some bats in the Bruce Peninsula on Lake Huron. They've set up some nets around these trails and tour around every 15 minutes to see if they've caught any visitors.
All right, no bats. If you leave them long enough, they will find their own way out. All right. It's
So
actually not
far,
looking so bad.
nothing. But Kristen has a bit of technology that can tell her if there are bats in the area.
So this is a bat detector, and what it does is it takes the echolocation calls of bats that are really high-pitched and it lowers them down to a sound that we can hear. So what we use this to do is listen in and hear how many bats are flying overhead. Oh, there he goes. We got one. I saw the net hit. That's what I want to see. I saw the net hit. You want to chill out, buddy? He's kind of got both of his wings through a different part of the net. So he's not badly tangled. One more strand. Okay, we're ready to get you processed. All right, so what we have here is a little brown bat. So the bat's wing is made up of his hand, so like ours. And so if we stretch this out, we can see his thumb here with the claw for climbing. So you can see his whole hand laid out, just like my hand would be laid out like that. And that's all those delicate little finger bones are what make up the wing. And then the membrane is very thin, but very strong, and you can see the blood vessels in there. All right, so what we can see here is his tail membrane that's connected to his feet. And this little pocket he's making right here is how he'll catch insects, and he'll scoop them up into his mouth. He has his mouth open, but you can't hear anything, and he's pulsing. So what this guy is doing is echolocating and getting a better idea of his surroundings.
With her bat detector, she can hear all the commotion.
So what we're doing now is we're going to weigh the bat. So we've zeroed the scale, get an idea of how much fat he's putting on before he hibernates. So this guy is 10.7 grams. So he's getting nice and chubby. You can see his belly right there is nice and round, which is what he needs to hibernate safely. The next thing we do is we measure his forearm length right here, just to get an idea of how big he is. So it's like taking your height. His forearm is 41 millimeters long, so he's a pretty big guy for a little brown. And then the other thing that I will do is I will inspect his wing for white nose damage. And so what I can see right now is there's no evidence of scarring, so he looks really healthy.
Little brown bats used to be America's most common wild mammal species. 8 years after white nose first came to North America, they're listed as threatened. Millions are dead, and only a small fraction remain. This area is a little brown bat hotspot, so it's no surprise when Yordi picks up another little brown bat off the nets.
So we can tell that this is a little brown bat and not one of the other species like a northern long-eared by looking at the shape of the tragus. So it's this tiny bit that extends within the ear, and that is the same part that you have inside your ear. Okay, so what we can see here is this bat has had a wing injury. We're not sure if this is something that was caused by a predator trying to get him or something else like being caught on a bush or a branch. So he's lost a large amount of his wing membrane, but he's still flying well, and you can see that a lot of it's regrowing. So if this bat had faced white nose syndrome, we would expect to see a lot more places that were injured and not just that one section. So we'd see lots more little damage spots, but you can see the rest of his wing is really nice and healthy.
Yordi brings up another bat, a red bat.
This is a migratory species, one that flies south for the winter, so it doesn't hibernate, and so far hasn't shown any exposure from the white nose syndrome.
There you go.
the bats that are going to be picking up the slack. We're going to rely on them to eat some of the insects that are left behind and not being eaten by these hibernating species.
The sun is rising over the Bruce Peninsula. Kristen and Yordi are packing it in after a hard night's work. They didn't find a ton of bats, but the ones they did find look well fed, and that's a great sign.
I've noticed in the past few weeks that they're getting chubbier and chubbier. It's an excellent sign. It means they're doing everything they need to get through hibernation.
There is no cure for white nose syndrome. And unfortunately, it's not going away anytime soon. Which is why it's critical for researchers like Kristen and Yordi to study and watch over them
so that they can find a way to stop this disease before it's too late.
I like bats because they are just so fascinating. They're small mammals that live for a really long time. We don't know a lot about them. I think that's what really draws me to them, is that we need to know more. So while they're still here and while we can still study them and understand what we can do to protect them, I think it's really important. I think they need a champion to learn more about them. All right, buddy.
as Kristen tries to protect the bats of Ontario. Jeff is trying to see whether the northern flying squirrels need protection from their southern cousins.
All right, another flying squirrel here, another southern flying squirrel.
It's close to midnight in Peterborough, Ontario. Jeff Bowman is hoping to trap flying squirrels here in the middle of the forest. To get a look at the southern and northern flying squirrels in one of the few areas where they share habitat.
We got one. Looks like a southern flying squirrel. So we'll have to scan it and see if we've caught this one before. Right.
Yep.
So this is a tagged one. We're just confirming the sex. This is a juvenile southern flying squirrel. It's a male. He weighed it at 57 grams. You can see the pure white belly fur, which is indicative of a southern flying squirrel. Tail of the squirrel, which acts as a rudder when the squirrel is gliding. And this squirrel has a shorter tail than the northern flying squirrel. It's about 110 millimeters usually, and it serves to help the squirrel steer when it's gliding. Okay, so we can release it.
20 years ago, the southern flying squirrels wouldn't be found this far north. Now they're more common than the northern flying squirrels.
Yep, so another male. Southern flying, juvenile.
All right, another flying squirrel here, another southern flying squirrel. Let's scan it again. This one's been tagged already and measured, so we don't need to do anything else with it. We'll just release it.
They take a break through the night and return the next morning to see what else they've caught.
I'm just going to take the squirrel out of the trap, and we just use this plastic bag here to quickly get the squirrel out of the trap, and then we use a clear bag like this just so we can see what we're doing easily. And it's a good way to sort of safely handle the squirrel. So an adult southern flying squirrel at this time of year should weigh around 65 grams. So this one's in the 50s, 56 grams, indicating it's a juvenile. A northern flying squirrel would weigh at least, an adult would weigh at least 90 grams. This is the patagium of the flying squirrel. This flap of skin is basically what allows the squirrel to glide. It puts its legs out and its forelimbs, and there's this flap of skin that connects between them, and it forms as a sail, kind of functions as a sail.
Tail's a rudder.
The tail is a bit of a rudder, that's right.
Finally, they catch a northern flying squirrel.
Okay, so it's a northern flying squirrel. So we'll measure the tail and the hind foot length. So this squirrel with the bag is 98 grams. So on the right, in Morgan's hand, is a northern flying squirrel, and on the left, the smaller one, is a southern flying squirrel. One of the ways to tell them apart is that this squirrel has two-tone belly fur. It has gray fur at the base. The southern flying squirrel on the left has pure white belly fur. The southern flying squirrel has a shorter tail. The northern flying squirrel has a much bigger, wider tail. And in general, the northern flying squirrel is just larger and more robust. That's a squirrel of it's kind of a cold adapted squirrel of the boreal forest. The southern flying squirrel is a temperate forest squirrel that specializes on eating seeds from trees.
The northern flying squirrels might be bigger, but it's the southerners that are the bullies.
Northern flying squirrels, we suspect that they lose out in competition with the southern flying squirrel for nest cavities to some extent. Both species like to nest in tree cavities in the winter, and if cavities are limiting at all, it's thought that the southern flying squirrel is more aggressive and can outcompete the northern flying squirrel for these limited cavities.
The northerners are more docile and less aggressive, which means they're being pushed out as the stronger southerners move more north. There's another side effect. They're mating, leading to an entirely new hybrid species.
We've discovered hybrid squirrels in central Ontario. We have this hybrid zone that's developing. About 4% of the squirrels that we sample are hybrids. Hybridization is one of those tricky processes to understand the implications of. Hybridization is one of the few ways to get rapid new combinations of genes. And those combinations might be a really effective way to deal with rapid environmental change. So hybridization is a process that can lead rapidly to evolution and sort of new traits that might be high fitness. However, you may also lead to a loss of the pure species, the parental, what we call the parental species, which would be in this case the northern flying squirrel. So pure northern flying squirrels may become less abundant.
Less abundant is bad news. The squirrels play an important role in the forest as pollinators, dispersing spores and seeds as they glide among the trees.
And it's not exactly known how these hybrids will fit into the ecosystem.
The future for these squirrels is uncertain at this point. I think that we will continue to see expansions of the range of the southern flying squirrel. We will likely see contractions of the range of the northern flying squirrel.
No one knows exactly what's going to happen with the squirrels. For now, it's just another example of nature at work, and Jeff gets to watch it unfold right before his eyes.
Well, they're very interesting. They do a lot of interesting things. Their behavioral ecology is really interesting. The fact that they're nocturnal and that they glide and that they're active in the winter rather than hibernating, that makes them have a lot of interesting ecology. It's an evolving situation, and we are interested to see what will happen as the environment continues to change.